So last night I talked about the Zen, the model of awakening, really the way that realization is conceptualized in the Zen tradition, and particularly my teaching and in my writing, how I'm viewing it, and a lot of this is based not just on theory, but on my own practice, seeing students' practices, and sort of marshaling the different realizations in that way. And tonight I want to talk about the Theravadan stages of awakening. And then when I finish with that, or during that, we can see some contrasts between the two. So the Theravadan map is the oldest map in Buddhism. Theravada is often translated as the way of the elders. And particularly in Myanmar and Burma, there's a lot of commitment to preserving the teachings the way the Buddha did them. My teacher would often say, we're doing this jhana practice exactly the way the Buddha did it. And I definitely believed him that was his perspective and his opinion. I don't personally know whether that's true or not, but I believe he did. He believed it to be true. And in fact, the government in Burma gives out awards to Buddhist teachers if you are the least innovative. Meaning if you toe the line and are the closest to the Buddha, then the government will give you like special recognition. So anyway, so teachers like me wouldn't do well there, because I'm constantly innovating and trying new things and combining and contrasting. But so going back to Theravada, there's 4 stages of awakening. Stream entry is the first, once returner is the second, non-returner third, and arahant is fourth. And when we use the term once returner, non-returner, we're talking about lifetimes. How many lifetimes does that individual have left before they're done? It's commonly believed that the stream enterer has 7 or less lifetimes left. It could be 1, it could be 7, but they'll have no more than 7 lifetimes, because the ultimate goal of Theravada Buddhism is to get off the wheel of existence. Buddhism believes in rebirth. Rebirth is not reincarnation. There's not an abiding something that goes from lifetime to lifetime. Rebirth means that something goes from lifetime to lifetime, but we're not exactly sure what. The interesting aspect of that is it seems as though one's realization, one's practice history does continue from lifetime to lifetime. And that's why there can be the different groups, once returner, non-returner. It's believed in traditional Theravada Buddhism that the once returner and the arahant are probably going to be reborn into an angel realm, a deva realm. And there they'll finish their practice. I once met a woman who had a past life recall of living in a deva realm. And it was really interesting talking with her about it. And she was just saying it was everything you could imagine. If angels had a place to live, this is what it was like. And everything was easy. Everything was beautiful. Everybody was beautiful. There was abundance of everything. There were no worries. And I said to her, what's the drawback of going to the deva realm? And she said, everything is so good and provided for you, there's no motivation to practice. So a lot of the devas don't practice at all. They just enjoy the deva realm. So Theravada Buddhism believes the human realm, this realm that we're in, is the most important realm, because this is the realm where we meet our dukkha, our suffering, our dissatisfactoriness, and that motivates most of us to have a spiritual practice. So this realm is considered the most important. One of the most important realizations for the stream enterer is that the view of the personality is broken, is shattered. And this is an important distinction. It's not saying that personality is gone. It's saying personality view is gone. And what that means is the conceptual belief, the conceptual structuring, the thoughts that support the idea of a separate self are broken. And so there's direct experience. And the direct,
say that again. That seems important.
yeah, the conceptual, the thought, the ideas that support the belief in a separate self, those are broken. So there's still some belief in the personality as a thing. It's lessened considerably, but we don't have a lot of the rumination about reifying the personality. You know, I talk about in Trust and Awakening about the putting down of preferences, like and dislike. It's one of the ways that we reify who we are, by repeating, by analyzing, going through life. I like that chair, I don't like that couch, and on and on. And that keeps us reminded, okay, that's who I am based upon my likes and dislikes. So the conviction in a separate self is broken. Another benefit is that any attachment to rituals and rites is also broken. And I think this goes to where there was a lot of ritual, and the ritual was often seen as an important thing in itself, that it was a representation of the deepest source. And so this is saying that no, we see through rituals, we can still do rituals, but they're not the same as the absolute. They're not the same as God. It's not direct. Any doubt about the Buddha, his enlightenment, his map of the spiritual journey, meditations or practices, is also vanquished. So trust in the Buddha is complete. And this is something that that I have in my book, which I didn't see in a lot of the written material, but what the stream enterer will work post cessation. Now, each of these stages of awakening is predicated on a deep experience of cessation. Cessation is the ceasing of mentality and materiality. That's the definition. It's the same as Nibbana Nirvana. When Buddhists want to achieve that, that's what they're talking about. Entering cessation, like some of the meditations we've done, going into the absolute, into the absence, deep into the peace and stillness, the peace and stillness quiet everything. And eventually they shut off awareness and consciousness. So it's a lights out experience. It's like falling asleep, except, for example, we don't have the body twitches that we have when we're falling asleep. There's a blackness. And it's a dreamless sleep. So if there are dreams, that's not cessation. Almost everybody that experiences cessation, when they awaken from cessation, awaken with an incredibly refreshed outlook. They feel deeply rested, rejuvenated, energetic. So it's really this tremendous wow kind of experience when they wake up. And they understand that the structuring the Buddha did of the path works. It's true. They've experienced cessation for themselves. Again, post-cessation, what the stream enterer will need to work with: envy, the coveting of another's possessions, jealousy, anger at another receiving what we wanted, hypocrisy, acting in conflict to our deepest truth, fraud, pretending what is not true is true, and denigration, minimizing ourself or another while we see it as a lack of value. So we're seeing the truth, we're seeing the absolute, and we're downplaying that, domineering, compulsively ordering others to conform to our view. So these are the issues that the stream mentor will be working. And in my book, Demystifying Awakening, I talk about this theory. I have the stair-step method. Whenever there's an awakening, a realization, it's followed by a highlighting of personality material, beliefs that are not in conformity with that realization. And we work through these, releasing, purifying whatever ones of those we can. And that begins to prepare us for another realization. At some point, when enough psychological work is completed, we seem to become open to a next realization. The second stage of awakening, the once returner. Again, this means that that person will only be reborn in human form one more lifetime, or they could be born in another realm. The once returner is free from belief in a separate self-identity. They no longer believe it. Any attachment to rites and rituals as a source of truth. They're free of any skepticism about the practices and the meditations taught and practiced by the Buddha. This once returner also has some qualities that are weakened. The craving for sensuousness, anything that our senses crave or lust for. So it can be food, drink, it can be anything that is pleasurable to the five senses that we want just for the sake of the pleasure, just for the sake of the sensual pleasure. And ill will is weakened, wishing negative experiences to happen to another. So really what's liberated here is a lot of the compulsiveness and the obsessiveness about asserting our wants, our needs, our sense of self are put down. The third stage is the non-returner. The non-returner is not subject to another human rebirth, as I mentioned. My understanding is they'll be reborn into a Deva realm, finish their practice there, and become an arahant. The non-returner is free from a belief in a self, free from any attachment to rituals as being the deepest truth. They're free of any skepticism about the Buddha, Buddhist teachings or practices. They're free of craving of the senses. They're free of ill will. They never wish harm upon another. They're free of aversion, rejecting some aspect of reality that's not beneficial. The non-returner is not yet free of craving for form jhanas or form absorptions. They're not free of craving for formless absorptions or formless jhanas. They're not free of restlessness. Restlessness being a lack of deep contentment and thoroughgoing acceptance of this moment. So they're still wanting something different. They're not free of ignorance. Because they still have the craving and restlessness, there's still a misunderstanding about true reality. Now, in Demystifying Awakening, I contrast the Daigo Teitei realization with the third stage of non-returner. Claire asked last night about whether it more rightfully might belong as a parallel to arahant. For me, it's really because the arahant is so elevated in Theravada Buddhism and has almost mythical, just a mythical staging, or it's just so heralded that I really didn't want to sort of enter into that disagreement about whether that was a parallel, because there are people who have had the Daigo Teitei that are living. So anyway, so I chose to stay out of that interaction by putting it there. So the arahant, and this is, I just want to say, the arahant is the ideal of Theravada Buddhism. This is the being that, again, no longer has human existence. And in the Mahayana, which Zen is included, and Buddhism went from India, Nepal, went to Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and then went into China. And in China, when it mixed with Confucianism and Taoism, became Chan, which became Zen. And so it had a different model. The Chinese, because of the Confucian, believed in family. They believed in respecting elders. There was a lot of social relationships that were important. And they got that the arahant model wasn't going to work for the Chinese. You know, they're more like Americans, where we're relational. We have lots of, you know, relations and friends, and all these things are important here. And the idea that we're going to go away and leave everybody else behind isn't really a very attractive model. It wasn't to the Chinese. I don't think it's that attractive to Americans en masse. So that then the Mahayanas came up with the model of the Bodhisattva. This is the being that's deeply realized, but holds off on full realization until all beings are awake, are realized. And so the impetus of the Bodhisattva is to continuously be reborn in human form, to continue their practice, and to continue saving all sentient beings. So very different models, but it was important because, again, the arahant was not going to get traction in China. So in Theravada Buddhism, in traditional Buddhism, the arahant is considered fully awake. It's considered, again, a very rare occurrence. In some of the old Buddhist suttas, the Buddhist sermons, I can't tell you how many times, and maybe you have read them too, the Buddha gave a talk, said something, and of the multitudes that were there, 5,000 people became arahants, and 7,000 became once returners, and so they were chock full of arahants in their day, and it's believed today that we have one or two per generation. I know that my teacher did a number of solo retreats. I visited him during one of the solo retreats, and he was working, his benefactors thought he was working, trying to get to third stage, the non-returner. And they were hoping he'd eventually get that and then turn his sights on the arahant. Because in Asia, if you're a benefactor of a really great teacher, if they're really attained, that gives you a lot of merit. And they really believe in collecting merit. A lot of the Asian Buddhists, at least in Theravadan world, don't practice. They don't meditate regularly. A lot of the young males will go off and do temporary ordination. They'll do up to 3 months as monastics. I've heard stories of them in some of the Thai monasteries where at night they're playing cards and smoking and drinking and having a good old time, sort of a boys' multi-month trip, but it's done for the families. The families really want it, and I'm sure there's some that are very sincere, but for a lot of them, it's just a rite of passage. So the arahant model, again, it's believed there's no more than a few arahants per lifetime, and because the arahants aren't believed to return to the human realm, to me that makes this even more difficult to assess whether this is a real realization or not, whether it's a model. So I'm not sure. So what this means is the arahant, the non-returner, when they die, their consciousness is going to remerge back into the absolute. And in Buddhism, it's believed then there's a reemergence into a new birth whenever the momentum of absence, peacefulness, and stillness power into the love and presence, and that is what forms life. That's the generativeness. And it's believed that the non-returner and arahant are going to reemerge, never to separate again. So they're staying merged in that state. The arahant is free from the following: a belief in a self, any attachment to rituals being the deepest truth, skeptical doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the practices, the community of Buddhist practitioners. They're free of craving of the senses, free of ill will, free of craving for form jhanas and formless jhanas. They're also, interestingly, free of conceit of attainments. So they don't have they're not holding their attainments in any superior way of, look what I have. And this is an issue that people work, even in the Zen model, with the Kensho and Satori in particular. The personality will try to grab on to being special. Look, I'm cool now, I'm in the club, all this. And that has to be worked. It's not something that we just allow to stay. Restlessness, they're also free of. So what that implies is a lack of deep contentment and thoroughgoing acceptance. And they're free of ignorance. Now, they're free of ignorance. In Buddhism, ignorance means not understanding the truth. And at this stage, they're releasing their cravings and restlessness. They're resting in deep, ongoing, present moment contentment with no perception of self or other, just a unified oneness. So this is the arahant. And I mean, looking back on the Daigo Teite, I can certainly see a tie-in there. So I think an argument could be made that there's some parallels. But again, I'm not one that's going to draw that parallel and be public about that. I think that's for others to do if they want. So let me just take a pause here and see about any questions about any of this or the Zen model. Each of the four stages is predicated on a deep experience of cessation. And in cessation, in that deep stillness, in that deep peace, in that nothingness, that's the center of the universe, things change. They get rearranged in such a way that when they come out of cessation, there's been, I refer to it sometimes that it's like you go on vacation, return home, and the furniture's been rearranged. The internal structuring is changed. Mm-hmm. So the question is, does the Absolute have some form of intelligence? My view is that the Absolute has wisdom. So it's not intelligence in the way we would think about it. If you think about Mother Nature, how nature conducts itself, we could say there's a wisdom in that, how it works. It's not necessarily sentimental. I grew up on Guam and Hawaii, and we were taught, the ocean can be a dangerous place. Yeah, it's fun, but it doesn't care about you. It's not going to watch out for you. So understanding that nature has some kind of neutrality. We want to infuse these things with human qualities, but they don't have them. So I think of the Absolute in the same kind of way. It's a generative force that somehow things come into creation. Babies are born, new plants are born, all the functioning of the Absolute. But how it happens, when it happens, it's mysterious what the qualities are that make it happen. And also we bring our own karma, our own cause and effect. We've done certain things in the conditioned world, and there's a result. So as humans, of course, we've damaged the planet tremendously. What's going to happen, we don't know yet. But it's not like there's somebody up there who's going to say, well, you guys tried. Let's just do a reset and let's let you try again. What may happen is our planet may cease, and maybe someday another planet will come. But that's the thing with the absolute. It's always been around. Cessation is the core. So if everything else gets destroyed, at some point out of cessation, new life will start, and it will begin in some fashion. That's my perspective, just, based on contact, but I don't really know if any of that's true or not.